wondering, you know, we haven't
Looking here.
Yeah, I'm looking for good examples. I don't see any.
Pretty new. There's a bunch of new here too.
Trick question. Not really new.
That's just shoots.
Yep.
Coming off the roots.
Yeah.
Coming out.
So, let's do a quickie on IDing knotweed. Once you get the eye for it, you'll be very depressed and cry yourself to sleep at night. It's, from here, do you see this pattern? From node to node to node to node to node, it doesn't really grow straight. It kind of branches back and forth and back and forth. This is a nice giveaway if you're driving by. Other things that help give it away, it's got this kind of mottled appearance. You can see sort of the red polka dots on it. That's that's a good giveaway. The leaves, this kind of heart-shaped, spade shape, a little bit of a drip tip. There is sometimes on a newer leaf, there's some purple. I don't see any right here, but when it's smaller and shorter, there can be some purple in the veins. Oh, you got one? Yeah, there's a little bit. So you can see that little bit of red, that little bit of purple. So it varies, the color does vary. There's really not that much out in the world like this. It is a very distinctive plant. One of the plants that is similar to this at a smaller height, I actually don't even know what it is. It's kind of like celery of some sort. But when you bend it, it stays bent, is what I've discovered. This stuff, if you bend it, it will actually snap back a little bit until you break it. And then that's that. At which point, it's also worth pointing out, it's kind of hard to rip, easier to cut. So you can peel it if you're curious. It tastes a bit like rhubarb. It is hollow in the middle. So each of these nodes has a floor, so to speak, and it's hollow in the middle. A lot of times there is water piled up in here. And feel free to run if you're getting uncomfortable. I'll just follow you. But until then, I'm just going to monologue. What else have we got going on here? So between those couple of things, if you've got 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4, the chances are it's knotweed. Like I said, there's a few things, especially small, like I've mistaken like red maples, that are this tall for knotweed because of that red color. But the red maple stands out because it doesn't have that mottled shape. It doesn't have this growth pattern. As you can see, knotweed has a tendency to grow in a monoculture. This is also why we care. If we were to poke around in here, there's a very small chance of finding much of anything else. It shades out, it crowds out. I have been to restoration sites where they planted a tree and the knotweed came in from further away, grew up around the tree and killed the tree. And so the restoration site was a waste of money. It was pointless because the invasive was going to come in and take over anyway. What's going on here? Let's see, where shall we start? Hey, how many plants do you think we have here? How many individuals? Yeah, trick question. So it could be as few as 1. This is where the trick gets trickier. If someone has been in here with a backhoe at some point and like dug out river access, or dumped in some fill for the parking lot, or whatever, and broke the root system severely enough, you can actually separate it off into 2 plants. And so when you get into treatment scenarios, it's actually better off to have 1 plant, generally speaking. If, for instance, if you're digging up plants in your backyard, what you're probably doing is making your problem worse. You are actually breaking it up into several plants so that if you effectively do something and you miss that 1 plant, that plant will regrow and keep going. The rhizomes on these, the underground runners, can be 50, 60 feet long. So theoretically, it's entirely possible for these plants to send a runner out under that road and pop something up on the other side in the island of the parking lot. Um, Based on different literatures and things, I'm getting something in that 6 to 9 foot range. So,
No,
yeah.
we didn't expect that answer.
On the other hand, now let's talk about erosion for a second. And again, feel free to stop me or correct me or jump in if I'm rushing or if I'm jumping too much. There's nothing growing in amongst this knotweed. That means that when the leaves drop, when it goes dormant for the winter, that late fall, early spring flooding, there's nothing on top of the ground. There's no ground cover holding the soil down. You're encouraging erosion. When you look at this bank in a certain context, you think, oh, this is a great riverbank. It's super stable. Look at that plant holding it down. It's really not, because if the water floods up, it'll wash out from the top. Now, again, looking at this, you might think, ooh, here, let's play a nice river geomorphology 101. Does this look much like a channelized stream bank? And what have we recently learned about channelization due to Irene? Anybody? All right, floodplains are good. They spread the water out. This is a really solid and dense plant. It grows up like a fence. It grows up like a wall. It will make floods worse. It won't let the water out, or it won't let the water flow downstream. It constrains the flood. And so then it just piles the water up somewhere. Or in this case, it channelizes it in, it pushes the water further down somewhere else, or further up somewhere else, and removes this to a point. If this particular patch was dense and wide, what would end up happening is that you'd essentially form up a reservoir, you'd form up a lake. And so you'd have that volume raising until it could overwhelm this, and then you've got that flood within the flood. So you've got, just above ground, you've got increased erosion, you've got increased threat from floods in several manners. Now, let's talk about what's underground. I said there was a 6 to 9 foot root system, right? I'll pull the roots out of the truck here in a second. I brought some flood debris with me. The roots are thin like angel hair pasta, the proper roots. It's that and it's rhizomes. The rhizomes are like underground stems. So what you end up with is a root system that doesn't hold soil. If this river moved over a little bit, or stream, brook, moved over a little bit and started to erode the bank, it could wash the soil out from within the plant itself. There's nothing holding it in place. Like if you see flood debris, like an elm tree washes downstream, it's got a big ball of dirt held still in its roots, right? This wouldn't do that. It doesn't hold soil. So then you get into that 6 to 9 foot comment that I made. If you've got an undercut bank or a bank that's channelized that drops 5 foot, 10 foot, 15 foot, I'm pretty sure there's a bank like that in Jamaica. You end up with an easily undercut bank. So like the big elms, the big ashes, the big cottonwoods, whatever's on your riverbank has a really big, deep, solid root system that holds your river there, holds your river bank there. And this doesn't offer any of that. So, big erosional risk, big erosional hazard. Not good on the sides of rivers, especially. So it undermines the banks, it increases floods, blah, blah, blah. It's bad enough, right? All right, now I make it worse. This is where I'm really going to scare the bejesus out of you. The way that this plant spreads is primarily through the two things I just mentioned. It wants to break off into pieces and float away downstream, and floods are ideal situations for that to happen. So this node I've got here, right? If you've got something like that, and maybe half an inch on either side, an inch on either side, that is viable plant material. It will land somewhere and grow new roots and make new plants. So the top can do that, and the roots can do that. So if this river flooded and washed out a section of this stuff, wherever it landed downstream, the chances of it rerooting and regrowing and taking a perfectly fine area and making it look like this over the course of time is fairly high. So my job, my goal, what I'm after, why the state basically decided they wanted me out here, is to go out and find the new stuff. Because this is an established problem, and this has some established management problems, practices, efforts, etc. All those nice words. But the new stuff, I can get a shovel, I can get a crowd like this, find some new plants, and dig them up and throw them in the trash bag, and it's done. This is a 3 to 5 year management plan to get rid of, no matter what particular mechanism you use, whether it's herbicides or hand pulling or anything. It's a 3 to 5 year plan. This season, we can get out and stop this from happening. And, you know, it's not necessarily improving on this problem, but it's definitely preventing this problem from getting worse. And when I talk to various people in state agencies, when I talk to various fishermen out on the rivers, they can tell me which flood it was that brought knotweed to their basin. And so the state wised up and decided to try to do something about it. So this is a nice opportunity to break off before we go look at the new knotweed and go talk about that and do a little more show and tell. Yeah, this is a good time for questions.
Where did this come from?
It is Japanese knotweed.
Yeah,
It is an ornamental brought from Japan to England. England has a really nasty problem with the stuff. And then, I guess, you know, some Americans with an inferiority complex decided that the British garden clubs were better than theirs, and they brought it over here and ruined our lives.
But in Japan,
Yes.
it's a native,
Yes.
and does it do this dastardly stuff over there?
No, and what we're getting into here is the definition of an invasive species. So if you think about the spread of people, you know, we are great, and there's 6 or 7 billion of us and whatever, and we carried our diseases and our parasites around with us as we traveled. So we always had something holding us back or holding us in check in a manner of speaking, even though we're really good at getting around it. This stuff, when you remove it from its native system where it has evolved a suite of parasites, a suite of predators, a suite of other critters in the ecosystem that are familiar with it and can either use it or take advantage of it or prey on it. You know, that's the native ecosystem, that's the native situation. An invasive species has just jumped out of that control, and there's nothing around here that has any interest in using it at all. There's no fungus that want to grow on it. There's no birds that want to eat it. There's no deer that want to browse on it. There's nothing holding this in check. You will find certain invasive species, certain like birds may nest in them, or certain things may decide to eat them, or whatever. But basically the ecosystem that is here, that belongs here, is behind you, and this is an entirely separate thing that has nothing to do with it. This is a bit like a green desert, in a manner of speaking. This might as well be a patch of sand for all its ecological usefulness. So.
If it comes from Japan, then it must be climate sensitive. So
Right. It's not really an issue in the kingdom, and I have yet to see it too high up. That's not saying it's not there, but it is sensitive to drought and to cold weather and extreme weather, essentially. And you're more likely in Vermont to get really extreme weather the higher up you go. So I haven't seen it up high, but with climate change kicking in, yeah.
Can you repeat her questions?
Oh, sorry. Well, do you want to?
I just said if it's from Japan, it must be climate sensitive.
So you need to say it because you have the.
Oh, sorry. So regarding the climate sensitivity of this plant, it is climate sensitive. It is weather sensitive. It does have a preference for stable, nice, warm places. But this is Vermont. We do get nasty weather, and the nasty weather does tend to be at a higher elevation or further north. And so the limits that we're seeing on this at the moment seem to be that White River area. There's a little bit north of it, but it hasn't really gotten up there. I'll hear more about that by the end of the summer. And then the really high valleys, the really high watersheds. I don't know if it hasn't gotten there because of the weather or because it just, by luck, no one has tracked any up that way. But you're right, it should be climate sensitive.
What I have, the diameters of the plants are considerably bigger than what I'm seeing right here. They're up to like an inch, you know, hollow. Everything else looks the same. So what is it? What do I have?
So,
I mean, it grows literally. I mean, you can watch it grow almost.
yeah,
I could pull it out, and that plant could show up overnight almost, like that one right there.
yes. Yeah. And so the size of the plant can get quite large. And what that says to me is that even though your plant may be an inch in diameter at the start, it's probably just more well established. This patch looks like it's only been here for, I don't know, let's say 5 years. Or it washed in a big flood, and it may have been bigger, but when they put the driveway in, it took a bunch out. It's a little more stressed. It doesn't have as much to give, I'm guessing, essentially. But it can get that big. It can get, I think we're in the 12-footer ballpark for a big stand, and about an inch, inch and a half diameter for a big one.
I have 8-foot plus type plants.
Yeah, yeah, and it might get taller. Oh, so let's talk about pulling them out. Pulling them out is almost a waste of time, actually, because that root system is so big. What you're doing is you're removing the photosynthesis. You're removing that nutrient-generating part of the plant. But, I mean, if you can imagine the root system of this thing, 6 feet deep and, potentially 50 feet to the left and right, it's like one big potato. There's a lot of nutrients for the upper part to draw on, and the lower part can just keep generating material. So for manually controlling this stuff, the recommendations are something in the range of cut it every 3 weeks down to the nubs, and do that for like 5 to 7 years, depending on how established and how big the patch is.
You're saying cut it, but don't remove it.
Cut it, right, because
From the smallest to the biggest, just cut it.
if you want to work it that way. If you decide to dig it up or pull out the stems, digging it up has the negative effect of essentially churning the soil like you would be gardening or you'd be plowing. You're opening it up, and you're making it easier for the roots to move around. The downside of pulling it is basically that you've broken off a bunch of roots underground and left behind a bunch of plants now that are going to generate separately. And it's not necessarily complicating, but it very well could be. In the back.
You said deer won't deal with it, but like if you were to fence off everything that looks like potentially one plant, multiple plants, and put sheep and goats in here
Fair
for 3
point.
to 5 years, and they eat it down to the nubs, I think of them as taking everything down to the nubs. Could they be a management plan?
Yes. If you force something to eat it, it has to, in a manner of speaking. And that's totally fair, fine, and viable. It's just a matter of having access to goats or having access to a friend with goats and managing, moving the cage back and forth and that whole thing. What you're going to end up doing is having the same effect. You're going to be forcing the potato to give up its nutrients, and you're trying to starve it to death. So, fair point, totally appropriate. I'd love to have a goat, but I don't have a goat. Yeah.
I can
Get
get
a
you
goat
one.
to lead.
I like goats, they're cute. Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't say that. I've never seen a goat eat it, but goats seem to eat everything. Yes?
I'm wondering if before the rain really comes hard, it wouldn't be a good bad idea to shoot over to the new stuff and talk about that, because it's supposed to rain pretty hard, and maybe we could do some more question and answer under the tent.
That's a fair suggestion. Let's follow it. And I will take your question over there.
Yeah, Brian, I've had some moderate success with starving it from sunlight with black plastic.
The trick with that, the downside to that,
Yeah.
is that 50-foot system of roots that kicks
Yeah.
out, and so it'll outgrow
Yeah,
and go away.
that's what's happening. Yeah.
Right, and so your problem with that is that no matter how well you fence off or cover up the section, there's usually enough resources for it to send out new runners and generate new nutrient-generating
Yeah.
plants.
Yeah.
So that's why it's not something I would recommend, but if you've already got it in place,
Yeah.
work with it.
Yeah, it's like you say, exactly what you're saying is happening. It's spreading beyond the area that was the initial area has been enlarged by the root system.
Yeah, and it's a smart plan. It'll go to where it can find some sunlight. Actually, here, I'm going to run and grab my piece of new stuff.
I just want the umbrella.
All right. So, where were we? We were doing questions.
Herbicide, what's your thoughts on herbicide?
So, herbicide. I am in a peculiarly unwieldy position with that. I'm not certified in the state of Vermont. The state of Vermont laws are that if you're not certified, you can't make recommendations. So I can talk about it in a very general way, but if it starts coming off as anything resembling a recommendation, I'm out of my depth and technically doing something illegal. On the other hand, I am certified in 2 other states, and I'm going to probably take my tests at some point in the summer. So what I can say about that, without sounding recommendation-y, is that it works. It introduces a different set of pros and cons, essentially, in the sense that it's often near water. You've got to be careful about spraying into the water. That takes a certain kind of contractor and a certain kind of chemical. It does tend to reduce your time spent managing. It usually ups the kill rate, but it is also, it requires specific timing for most effective treatments.
As a homeowner, though, we're allowed to use it, right? We don't have to hire that out.
As a homeowner, you have more abilities to do things on your own land. And I think going beyond that, yeah. Yeah. Right, and there are some limitations that come in such that if you were to buy certain chemicals, you would need a permit of some sort to buy them to begin with. But if there's, for sort of that over-the-counter stuff, you can, generally speaking, use it without permits. Education is good. You know, knowing what you're doing is awesome, but yeah, generally it falls into that category of it's your land and you can do what you want with it as long as you're not doing something illegal.
There's certain chemicals that work better for it, right?
Yeah, there's about half a dozen effective chemicals, and there's 2 that get more use than others. And I think if I mention which ones they are, that's a recommendation. Yeah. And there's a great state agency for herbicides that can answer all your questions. And my boss, Bob Popp, the state botanist, just recently got his certification, and he will be more than happy to tell you all the details that I can.
Have there been any successful removals of non-weed that you know of?
I don't know, because most of the stories, the way I talk about invasives with other invasive managers is how the management plan is going, you know, and what your like percent success rate is, and what was it last year and what was it the year before. And the assumption isn't necessarily that you've won or beaten it. The assumption is that you've got it under control, and you're always getting better. You're always getting it more under control. And then as soon as a project reaches that completion phase, so to speak, it's sort of off the back. You know, people don't mention it anymore because they're not working on it. So I probably could find you some, but that's not something I've been talking about, so to speak. We doing good?
You said when it gets dry, you can burn it, but that would be only a temporary fix, wouldn't it? It wouldn't get to the roots or...
You couldn't actually really burn this stuff effectively because it's so wet.
Once they cut it.
Right, after it's cut.
Once you cut it, once you dry it.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh.
Right. Right.
Yeah, continue on that line. So if it's cut, if it's there, it could dry, but it shouldn't just sit there.
Right. So if you cut knotweed, the problem you have is that if we cut down these little pieces we've got here and just let them fall to the ground, they have nodes still on the plant, and those nodes are all viable to grow back again. And so
So if you mow high on it, does that make any difference?
it does, because then the roots can't reach the ground. If it started to grow out a new root system, it couldn't reach the ground. And so like if you put these on a pallet, say, that air flow underneath would dry the roots out, would make it difficult to reach the soil, and you'd let it die. And it takes about 3 weeks to be sure of yourself. So if you are throwing it in a garbage bin to compost, or you're putting it up somewhere high to dry out before either composting or burning, about 3 weeks is what it takes to be sure that it really is dead.
And you could compost it then?
I would say that with an asterisk. Keep it in its own pile. Make sure that you've let it go for 3 weeks, and keep it in its own pile. I know I said that already, but that's the emphasis. Just, don't make any mistakes. If you accidentally have some that's still alive, you don't want knotweed growing out of your good compost. You want trash compost, essentially.
Yeah. Knotweed only compost?
Yeah. Yeah, invasives only pile.
It grows in the dark, under plastic. Plastic doesn't work.
Yeah, so the commentary about plastic not working goes back into the comment about the rhizomes being so long. So if you cover up a patch that you have, like that patch over there, if we cover the whole thing with black plastic, that'd be great. But that 50-foot boundary on either side that it could send a rhizome out to and send up a new shoot and generate new nutrients, you have a problem. So really, black plastic, you're 100 square feet in every direction off. So it gets prohibitively expensive and troublesome and irksome and annoying. So I would generally avoid that choice of management.
So is it a good possibility that that stand over there is one plant on both sides of the river?
I wouldn't discount it. I mean, I'd guess against it, if only because, I don't know, it just seems a bit much to have a root system growing under an active river channel. But you never know. It's a hardy plant, and it's within that 50-foot spacing. So, big maybe.
Are there any other plants that behave like this, sending off root systems?
There are several other plants that behave like this. Many of them are invasive in other parts of the country. Arundo donax is one that's a big deal in the southeast. It's a very similar choice of location in the ecosystem. It's got a very similar growth form and a very similar impact on erosion and flooding. In the local neighborhood, I don't know of any that are quite so troublesome. But like, for instance, like aspens, they grow the same way. One of the biggest organisms on the planet is like 3 mountainsides in Utah that are all the same clonal aspen. So, that's kind of neat. And there is an underground fungus that takes up about half of the upper peninsula of Michigan. And while not quite the same, close enough. So yeah, other things grow this way. It's a great strategy for a lot of things. But most of the time they're not invasive.
So how are you going to take care of this?
Well, so what we're going to go over here is I'm going to run through my indicators that I sort of handed out over there in your handouts. And what I've got here is actual flood debris knotweed. You can see sort of that root system that doesn't hold soil. I'm just shaking the sand out. You can see how thin and, it's really not graspy. And then what you've got here is the flood debris. You can see there's a broken piece right here. This is where it broke off of whatever was upstream where it came from. And here as well. And this was probably an underground rhizome. And it landed, and I dug it up, and you can see that I did a good job because the roots have a yellow color to the wood, or the rhizomes, the underground stems have a yellow color, and there's no fresh yellow colors sticking off here. So this is an entire complete plant, and done, problem solved. I can throw this away when I'm done. I'll probably take a picture of it before I do, but so that is flood debris. So this stuff in front of us, what I would look at first, I go, okay, within 50 odd feet of me, is there an established patch of knotweed? And I circle this way, no, 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 no. All right, so what's the distance from here to there?
Pretty close to 50.
That's pretty close. That patch looks established. It's got all the telltale signs you can see, maybe you can't see, those are branches. In older patches, there's often last year's stem growing. And if there isn't, there's often broken off stems at a ground level. Like the flood washed them away, but you can still see that there's a stem growing there last year. So seeing this here, seeing that there, this could be new. It could be old. Right now it's sort of either way. It's far away, it's small, but it's close enough. Now we also take a look and we think, okay, has anything maybe washed in? Is this flood debris? Is there anything here that would indicate that this particular patch of lawn was flooded and maybe some knotweed was introduced?
New grass.
Yeah, new grass.
Well, if you saw the pictures from last year, you knew this was all sand. So.
Right, and so, you know, this, again, you're like, well, maybe it's on the right floodplain. We got brook, we've got da-da-da. So maybe. At which point, not really knowing and not really being able to tell, the only way to find out is to stick a shovel in it. And I think that responsibility belongs to... So, with that piece of flood debris going around as an example, you don't really want to dig right into the stem. You know, you want to dig kind of far away and just kind of pop it and see what's going on and see if you're going to have something underneath. So let's see what happens. If it's no good, try another one. Right, now gently, because we want to see, we don't want to break off the, we don't want to break anything and leave anything behind if we can help it. And what do we have? Ah, so here, that is 2 broken roots.
Oh, so we broke it by pulling it up.
You did. And that is definitely not flood debris. That is new topsoil. These are part of that. And, you know, again, I might be wrong. You know, was topsoil imported over flood sands?
Yeah, this was all flooded. The topsoil was brought in, but this was coming up prior to the topsoil.
So then what's going on is that if there is flood debris, it's all the way down, and this has sent up new shoots through the flood debris and then through the topsoil. So you'd have to dig down to that level to find it and remove it. And
so
if you use your lawnmower on this, what's the result?
Repeat the question.
So the result of using a lawnmower on this would be that it would stay down and it might spread, you know, because you'd break off these little nodes, and if there's a big enough piece left on the ground, it could grow back. But because you're mowing it so consistently, you'd have a consolidated small patch that wouldn't ever get out of hand, wouldn't ever be a problem. It just would displace some of the grass. And maybe, you know, over time, in say maybe 10 years, it actually is big enough that it starts to send shoots off in another direction, that the mowing isn't keeping it under control. But my instincts, my guesses are that mowing will keep it down. It won't solve the problem, but it'll make the problem prettier, because it'll just look like grass.
So like cutting this off by hand and then mowing it weekly is not going to kill this off?
Maybe, because you are cutting it off, you are removing the potential new plants, the new nodes, and then whatever's down there is putting out its energy into growing new shoots. And as long as you keep removing those plants, making sure that you're not spreading the nodes, then yeah, maybe.
Unless it's part of that plant.
Right. But this...
Well, if it's part of that plant, it'll kill off the roots here eventually, right?
If it's part of that plant will just keep sending resources along this rhizome, and you will be able to trace it back, you know, all the way through that grass, those stalls. There will be a line. So you may be keeping this mowed and pretty, but eventually, that'll grow in. This particular patch, based on where we are, based on these things being here with the sand and what they seem to have washed in with the sand, I'd guess that they're new. And, if you wanted to, you could dig down far enough and probably get it all. But I don't, like a foot of topsoil, 6 inches, how much?
3, 4.
That'd be a lot of work to make sure you found.
3 or 4 inches.
Oh, I thought you said, sorry. It's doable. You'd have to be intentional. You'd have to be careful. And you'd have to dig in probably from further down to make sure that you got the whole thing, because it could be something like what I passed around for a piece, but it could also be this far and that. So.
I'm sort of wondering if one controls it on the lawn areas is with a mower. How does one prevent it from the nodes from getting spread around?
If you want to mow a section with knotweed on it and you want to keep the nodes under control, you would go around and cut these down by hand and remove them separately and then mow the grass.
I see, yeah.
And, it's a long-term control strategy. It's kind of dull and boring and labor-intensive, but it will prevent any new plants from being generated that maybe can escape the mower blade.
But if you were to mow right over them, or the smaller plants, if you were to mow right over them, would that increase the likelihood that it would spread, the nodes being dispersed like that? Or?
The chances of spreading knotweed by mowing to an area really far away is probably low, unless you've got one of those mowers that spits the grass, 15 feet off to the left. I'd say the chances are fairly good that you'll keep the infestation local, but there's always a chance to do otherwise. It's just the way of things. There's always a chance. Safer is always better. More careful is always better. Yeah.
So would it be recommended to use a mower with a bag attachment and then...
If you were to mow this and to mow it into a bag attachment, you would have to make sure that that bag attachment either went to the landfill or to the invasives compost pile off on the side, just to be safe, because anything in there that you threw into your normal compost or that you threw into like the stream or anywhere that it could potentially grow, you just want to keep that in mind.
But it couldn't get bagged and go with household garbage.
It could go with household garbage because we're hoping that goes to the landfill in this case.
So basically we blew it here. We should have, before we did any topsoil, any grading, we should have gone, found the broken off rhizomes or plant parts, dug them up.
Yeah. I don't want to say you blew it, but it would have been better if you had seen these growing in, recognized them for what they were, and dug them out first. But that's the way it goes.
It's not so bad, though. I mean, you can do this by hand every week.
It's true.
Before the farmer's market.
If you want to put up a sign and let them grow into big, healthy stems, but honestly, I'd rather just, egg them a little bit and make them dig them up, and, you can put a sign with a picture that say, these used to be here. That is your teachable moment.
But it's also possible it's from this patch over here.
Right, and you won't know until you actually dug down to either the rhizome running from here to here, or until you hit a chunk of something underneath, because all of the flood debris is growing out of something. There's a source, whether it be a piece of rhizome, a piece of stem, a piece of root. It's a distinct, unique, separate piece. If we go down far enough on some of these and find, that line running, or we can start to peel it back, it's not flood debris.
How do you know it didn't in the topsoil?
We don't. We're hoping the topsoil is clean, but we are not humoring that option because it would be really, really depressing, and this is bad enough already.
Didn't you say, though, that you saw this before they put the topsoil on?
Yes.
So
You did see this before the topsoil?
Yeah.
Oh.
Before the topsoil and after, and not prior to the flood. But the question's still valid in the sense that when people came and did the road work and were bringing fill and moving fill around, this stuff had been moved around and has been moved around. And so the threat of this stuff being just brought to your property by someone with a truckload of dirt or soil or however, it is a viable method of spread. And that's, unfortunately, that's not something that is easy to deal with because often, like fill materials, there's a lot of stone, a lot of rock, hard stuff to dig in. It's just really hard to deal with.
Question.
Hey, you got it.
How delicate are the roots? Can you yank them out, or will they break off?
The roots are very delicate. You can see on this one here that these little hit. Can you zoom in on this guy?
Yeah, I did actually already. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'll stop moving then. So these little roots are very delicate, very rippable. This stem is very delicate. It's hollow. And so the chances of breaking this inadvertently are rather high. So you do want to be delicate as you dig up the newer patches.
And you can see the larger ones sticking up everything, but are these actually?
Yep. They sure look like them.
These little purple ones?
Right, and so this is a great opportunity if you guys want to check out these little ones. Oh, yeah. That's different, isn't it? See, this is all active growing root that we've got here, whereas this is the source material. This is great. This is a great example. So you can see the hollow bit here. This probably was a stem. This was probably above ground. The hollow rhizomes, they don't show this well. It's more like pockets of air inside the root. This one has got a nice long tunnel running down the middle. This chunk washed out with a ball of root mass and a little bit of stem washed downstream and landed here. And you can see what's going on over here in the back, all these white bits that are in the soil. Anything that got left behind, any of that white stuff over here on the ground is basically viable plant material. So as he's digging that out, if he leaves that white stuff behind, all this great work he's doing may not add up to anything because if he misses one, another plant may come up right there again.
I'm not sure what you mean by the white stuff. Is that
This stuff,
is that part of the root structure, the white stuff?
Yeah, so this is essentially the stem underground. And you can see here where the color changes, how it goes from kind of white, it has a node, another node, and then it gets kind of green and then kind of red. That's the plant just emerging from the soil and starting to photosynthesize. And so this is about as small as a plant gets, or as small as a stem gets. I don't want to make that mistake of confusing plant and stem.
So that is a stem, and the roots are very thin.
Yeah. Do we have any roots? I've got so here's the new root that I dug up that was in a sandy washout section. And these are all stems. Yeah. What's in that bundle? Let's see that one, actually.
It's got some root.
Yeah, so here's a little bit of root growing off of the very top. You see these white, yeah. And you can see, so that's the root. There's really no strength to it. There's no structure to it. There's no soil holding abilities, again, getting back to that erosion threat. And then this is just one long underground stem that, and the root mass is down here.
There's another wash out right
So
there.
is this an older stem?
I think this just broke off. And the only reason I'm saying that is right at the end here, that's kind of yellow, it's kind of jagged. It looks like it's been cut recently. If it was an older piece, it wouldn't have this sort of raw wound, so to speak. It would have like crusted over with soil and dirt and rotted a little bit.
Are the roots of the individual plants connected to the rhizome, or I don't quite see? Are they connected, or are they?
All right, let's play a demonstration game. So, if this was an underground rhizome, let's just say this is an underground rhizome, and we'll put it there. So that is underground right now, imaginarily speaking. It can send up a new stem here, and a new stem here, and then, you know, further on down the line, and another, and another, and another. And so one rhizome running underground can send up several stems. So in a different context, theoretically, all of these plants we're looking at could actually be running off of the same rhizome that's just twisting and turning underground. So when you see a patch like this one and this one, you know, how linearly these are set, you know, this is nice in a straight line, and, you know, it goes over to that one, and behind me, there's one right there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that would be a great rhizome, just popping one up now and again.
And it sprouts also from the fine root hairs?
No, not the fine root hairs, the rhizomes.
Only the rhizomes.
Because the rhizomes are the piece that have the node, and the node, you can see sort of here how it's got the leaf here and the leaf here. One of these turns into another branch, another stem that grows new nodes, and the other one's the flower, the leaf. So where that material is, biologically speaking, that's your stem cell, in another way of putting it. That's your eternally young, eternally resproutable material.
So the root structure goes down possibly 6 or 7 feet or 8 feet or whatever, and that's it goes down, the root structure goes down that, I mean, a linear, like a root, like that one you're holding.
Yep.
It could extend down for 8 feet, that root.
This root, yes. Well, I just want to clarify that this particular part, it wouldn't grow from a rhizome 8 feet underground. That would be a bit much for this to shoot up through. What would happen is that this would go down, there'd be a rhizome, and then that rhizome would have other roots growing off of it, and then maybe it'd drop down to another level, and then maybe it'd start up another underground rhizome. But the plants itself, they couldn't put through 8 feet of soil to send up a new shoot.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's gnarly, it's nasty, it's invasive, it spreads easily and madly and wildly, and I don't like it. And I want you not to like it, and find new pieces and let me know about them and map them and log on to that IMAP thing and start reporting so that I could organize an event like this and know where to go. My limitation doing my job this summer is that I've got the whole state to look after. They only hired me, they didn't give me a crew. They said, go find some volunteers, go find some interested people that want to do something about this and organize and motivate, blah, 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 etc. To do that work, like, I didn't know this was here, and I would have driven right by it looking somewhere else for work to do. But, you know, these guys know it's here, and unless they, like, put it on a map for me to find or send me an email with some GPS points or etc., you know, you see where I'm going. I need the information to do the work, and that's really what's lacking. And so that's part of, that's really the beginning of my summer, is motivating folks like yourself or viewers like there to let me know where these things are. And that IMAP thing is a new statewide invasive species database. It's really slick. It's really cool. Anybody can look at it. Anybody can report on it. It's a nice citizen science crowdsourcing tool. It's cloud-based. You don't need mapping skills. You don't need to be all that computer literate. You need to be like middling computer literate. If you can look for directions from Vermont to New Hampshire, you can use IMAP. It's that level.
Can you do it from your smartphone?
It's on the handout. There's 2 links. There's one to some training videos, and there's one to where you would log on to get just your password, like anything else with the internet. And then, you know, what I am looking for, what I'm trying to get, are where the new things are. Like, if anyone here were to say, oh, you know what, I'm going to go home and map something later. If you want to map that big stand of knotweed over there, or that big stand over there, that'd be great. I'm not going to tell you not to. But the value of your time, the value of your knowledge and information, and what's really going to help me do my job is letting me know about these new things that have popped up in new places where maybe they hadn't been last year. And so to do that, you guys need an eye. You need to be able to see it. And so that's part of what I was doing over there and part of what we're doing here. So if you get the chance, get down and look at some of these smaller ones, because this is the hard stuff to see. This is the hard stuff to find. And this is probably the most important stuff to find. Does that sound as a recommendation? No. Yes, it does kill it. You asked about the brand. I didn't mention it. It does kill it.
Does glyphosate kill it?
It does kill it. Anybody else want to throw the brands out there instead of me?
What was the second one?
Glyphosate is the
What's
So
it
the
called?
newer stuff should only be about that deep in the soil for now.
Yeah, because as flood debris, it washed in, it landed, there's a little siltation on top of it. It shouldn't be deep. It should be right on top of things. In a couple of places, it is deeper, but not by much. Yeah, it's the deepest thing I've found that was new was probably about that far under.
When citizen volunteers do go to your IMAP, is there a way to distinguish between what we would say is an established and what we are speculating is new? If we want to put those on their map for you, and then you...
There is a way to distinguish on IMAP between a newer one that is, say, a rapid response candidate and an older one. And what that would be is that after you report the location, there's a secondary part of the reporting process. It's called the assessment. And in the assessment, there is a drop-down box near the bottom where you can choose the age of the stand that you're reporting. And because IMAP is designed for several different kinds of invasives, one of the categories is rapid response candidate. And so rapid response candidate would be the way to mark a new thing, because then when I download all that data, I can sort by rapid response candidates. Or there's also a section where you can write notes in. There's also a section where you can add a picture. Any of these, there's several ways to do it. The most straightforward is rapid response. The picture and the notes are a little less straightforward. There's always the potential for confusion or misunderstanding, but the rapid response is really straightforward.
So the information comes to you, it's on your IMAP. It's sounding like then you would be responding, but you've already made the point that you don't have a team and you can't be everywhere. So it seems you need a rapid response team that's in southeast Vermont, and then you would say, I've got these 10 sites that have been identified for rapid response. Can you get to any of them?
You are entirely correct. I do not have a team. I do not have people. What I would be doing is taking all this information, gathering it together, and say, passing it on to someone locally who might want to be a leader in taking on this role and and giving them this information saying, hi, I've got all this, I've put it all together for you, here it is wrapped up with a bow, please go out and lead a workday. I could come down and lead a workday as well, but ideally I'm in a different watershed having a meeting like this, educating people and hopefully motivating people. And again, because my job only runs through September, I can't be the leader. I have to make sure that there's a local leader who maybe wants to...
Well, who's going to be in charge of IMAP when you leave?
It is a Nature Conservancy project. It is up and running. They've got, I think, 7 states with IMAP right now. They're trying to go bigger with more states, but for now, Vermont does have it. It is totally accessible. It is totally useful and slick and easy to use, and I very much encourage you to check it out and have a look and play with it. It's kind of fun.
Is there a library of different types of invasives? You said that
There is a library of different types of invasives. That is on the Vermont Invasives website. Also, there's a link to that on the handout I just gave out. And they have there a gallery of invaders. And they have chemical and hand-pulling and mechanical, like with machines and gasoline, versions of managing for different invasives as appropriate. And it's a great clearinghouse for that invasive species 101. You know, it's not everything. It's not going to give you all your answers, but it will definitely set you on the right path to finding the answers you're looking for.
I'm sorry, you said that's on the handout?
Yeah, that's on sort of the front page right above the 2 pictures.
what does the, and I know it can't be your job, but what does the agency tell state highway people and the town of Brattleboro to do in terms of roadside cutting?
I'm not aware of what the state or the... I haven't looked at... So regarding what the highway people are set up to do and the road crews are set up to do, I'm unaware of them having any specific instructions. I have talked to some road crew members, and what they have told me is that they just mow it down because their concerns are visibility for road signs.
Right.
And so their work schedule doesn't necessarily allow them to be ecological stewards. That's not part of their job description.
Right.
And so an educated road crew member now only knows that he's making it worse rather than just being ignorant, as far as I know. I'd like...
Cut it, they drag it, it keeps spreading further and further.
Or they'll just cut it and leave it. And then the problem is still there.
Right.
It's not getting any better, and it's just they're knocking it down. Right. Again, I don't know that for a fact. I need to double check that. What I have seen in the New Hampshire Road Crew Manual is that when possible, they do try to avoid it. They do try to have manage, not necessarily to remove it, but not to make it worse when they are aware of the plant being present. But that also requires knowing what the plant looks like. So, and we had another question kind of evolve over this way.
I have two questions. How far can those stems travel? Say you put a mulch pile or something. Will those stems, how far from the rhizome will the stem travel?
At the moment, I'm under the impression that a rhizome 5 feet underground, 4.5 feet underground, can successfully put up a stem.
So if you put a pile of, say, manure right next to the big infestation of that, it could go right through it. And then every time you dug it and moved it onto your garden, you could be putting a stem.
Unless you had something like manure, it's soft, it's relatively fertile. I'd back up and say, I bet 10 feet would do the job.
So how much of a stem piece do you need to actually grow it?
You only need the node and about an inch of material, an inch of plant material and the node.
My other question is, I see it mostly on the sides of fields and not in the forest. Is it more likely to be somewhere where there's open space, or?
The plant is more likely to be somewhere where there's water. It is a very wet plant. If we broke off a piece over there, you can see there's a puddle of water often in between the nodes. It's very wet. It's very juicy. Because of that, it's going to prefer a moist environment. You're going to see it along stream banks. You're going to see it along roads where water washes off the pavement. The edges of the fields, you will see that sometimes because that's just where the water runs off the soil. You know, that drier, more fertile growing stuff. And then when you have a big storm and things wash off the edges, you end up with sort of a gutter in a lot of cases. You're going to see it there more often. It tends not to be in the middle of the woods, not only because it tends to be drier, but also because there's no pathway to get it there. You know, up and down the roads, you have cars catching it in the tires. You have people breaking it and blowing in the wind. Up and down the rivers, you have floods. In the fields, you have farm equipment. It breaks, it moves. It breaks, it moves. You don't really have a pathway for transit when you get into denser, thicker, more upland scenarios.
I have two questions for you, Brian. First of all, is it really reasonable to think that one could go down and remove the actual rhizome or whatever rhizome there is under there, which could be as much as I said 50 feet long, maybe, I don't know. But is it really reasonable to think that one could go down and remove root structure like that?
I would say it is unreasonable to do that, if only because, as we've been watching over here, that's been a very small piece of flood debris without a rhizome, and there's been 10, 20 minutes of digging to try to do the job. If you were to try to get to that rhizome, first you would have to get down that foot, 2 feet, 3 feet underground, find it, and then excavate the trench the whole length of the thing, and the whole time slowly peel it up, because it will break very easily. I would say it is unreasonable to do that. If you've got, a week on your hands and you don't really know what to do with yourself, feel free, go for it, have a good time. But it's really not an effective means to accomplish your goal.
But it really is the only way to completely rid the earth of the plant.
Well, there's other ways to do it, such as starving it to death and poisoning it.
Yeah.
I can say that because you can also use acetic acid or citric acid. They have low effectiveness rates, but they're not herbicides. They're just sort of garden variety herbicides. So you get something like 25% success rate with that kind of stuff. Not really the most effective, but if you are against chemicals either financially or morally, it is another option for treating things. And we had a hand.
Well, I just saw a video of what they're doing in England.
Yeah.
They actually are taking out like 300 yards of topsoil, shipping it to a site, bringing in new topsoil. That's how one of the ways they're dealing with it, which is
bonkers.
That's how they do it.
That's amazing that that's the most reasonable thing for them to do, because it just seems crazy.
I guess there's such a problem over there that people can't sell their properties if they got knotweed on their property.
I believe it. You can actually, if you have knotweed growing near your house, it'll break your foundation. No? Yes.
It flowers in the fall.
It does flower.
Something to be worried about?
Not really, actually. It's about 99% sterile. The primary means of spread is breaking off a new piece. So flowering, you can worry about it if you want to, but there's better reasons to worry about it.
And that's why it was once bought and sold in nurseries.
Because it's pretty.
It's pretty.
Yeah, just like loosestrife, but let's not go there. So, yeah.
I understand it's edible and that there are some medicinal uses for
Tastes
it.
like asparagus.
Rhubarb, I would have gone with rhubarb. It looks like asparagus. As for medicinal, I'm not as clear on that. I've seen that as well. I don't really buy it at the moment, but it is edible. Pieces about asparagus high are less bitter. They're more tasty. They make a decent pie, and I've seen a recipe for infusing vodka with them.
There's also a I have a recipe at my shop for Japanese knotweed squares. So cook them like brownies.
Yeah.
So it's dessert,
Yeah.
not the main course?
No, it's not the main course. I think it'd be a long dinner if it was the main course. If you want, break a piece off, have a taste of it. It's got that bittersweet flavor, but I wouldn't have eaten the outside. I would have stuck to the inside. But I don't know. How is it?
It's not bad.
Yeah.
It's kind of
I think in the springtime, the
like a
shoots
mild
look
rhubarb.
like asparagus.
Yeah,
They could
and
be
that's
very
the ideal time to get them, when they're small. And if you have, I saw this in the New York Times recently, it was posted as a joke because they had a foraged foods dinner meal, and they had their foraged foods shipped in from Vermont, and one of the foraged foods was knotweed. And so it was very funny that the foraged foods special dinner was shipped in. It just, yeah, great foragers, UPS.
Where else is it in the United States?
It is all over the place. It tends to be an eastern seaboard problem. When you get down further south, kudzu takes over as the main headache. When you go out west, you get into arundo as a bigger headache. When you get into the Midwest, I'm not really sure. I don't know if it's sort of crossed the mountains, so to speak. I suspect it's there, just because it's invasive, but I don't know. I haven't looked.
Is there anything we could, I think of the blackberry plants that overtake everything and send their own shoots out. Can you establish something like that and it'll win against this and choke it?
I have not been made aware of any cage match.
Mano y mano?
Yeah.
Mano y planto?
I don't know of any cage match bouts where the knotweed has come out the loser.
Yeah, I guess that looks pretty tough.
It's a great mental image, though.
So
I can see the Function Junction cartoon.
Brian, in reference to the existing patches of the knotweed, trying to control the already established plants. And if one is using an herbicide of some sort, is it the recommendation to cut it down to the ground and apply the herbicide, or would one apply it to the leaves of the plant?
So in regards to either doing a cut and then the stump treatment versus a foliar treatment, there's pros and cons to both. One is often more labor intensive, one is often riskier in terms of spraying something else accidentally. The foliar spray tends to be cheaper because you end up using less time. You may use more chemical, but it's less time. You spray it. The cut stump thing, you do have the problem of removing that biomass, doing something with it, and then going and treating each individual stem. The pro there, though, is that you're not going to necessarily end up with herbicide on a non-target plant. And so really that's going to depend on where you are and what else there is around you. So if you happen to be in a well-infested area that has, say, Japanese knotweed in the middle, and there's some multiflora rose and some honeysuckle and some buckthorn surrounding it, you probably don't much care what ends up to the excess herbicide. But if you happen to be on a river, if you happen to be in a wetland, if you happen to be in a neighborhood, you're probably going to be much more concerned with where that extra herbicide ends up. But again, without getting into the recommendation and the specifics, I think that's about as far as I can go.
And how long do the herbicides usually take?
You're getting into that like 2 to 3 year management plan generally.
But if you apply today, and I would assume you wouldn't want rain in the next 3 days, is there any effect in the near term, or this is a repeat over?
You would probably see an effect in like 3 to 4 weeks. The first 2 or 3 weeks, it would look like nothing happened. So you'd have to exert a little bit of patience to see what your results are.
In the springtime, I noticed that this year there's a plant, and I know it's not this knotweed, that is a very vibrant green. And everything else really hasn't any color. It shows to be this, it's somewhat like a briar kind of bush, but it's definitely a thick ground cover, and you do see it along the rivers too. What am I seeing? And it's a very vibrant green long before anything else turns color.
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but what I would guess is that it is invasive, because most invasive plants, the reason they're so successful and can crowd things out is they start growing sooner and they stop growing later. And so if it's the first thing to turn green in the spring, there is a fairly good chance that it is an invader, because any plant with any sense would hold on until like that last sneaky snowfall has gone by and then start growing. But the invasives, they just put out and they grow like weeds, and so they kind of fight their way through that last cold snap, whereas some of the natives of...
Especially was along the new West River Trail.
Yeah, I mean, it could be rose, it could be a honeysuckle, it could be like a berry kind of thing.
It really mats the ground. There's nothing growing underneath it.
Goutweed? I don't know. Goutweed grows in big mats. It's not so viney. It's more of a ground cover plant, and that's a nasty one too.
That grows, like this kind of height.
Yeah, I don't know. Without seeing it, I don't know. It's probably invasive. Just a hunch.
I assumed it was.
But check out that invaders gallery on the Vermont Invasives website, and that will give you a bunch of good pictures, and you'll probably be able to pick it out there if it is an invasive. How we doing over here in our hole? That good, huh?
I'm feeling a little depressed about this.
Discouraged.
Hey, so what'd you get? Let's see if we should be discouraged or not. So what we have here, was the stem on this side or this side?
I don't know.
Okay, so what we have here this has all the markings of being flood debris. And on one end, I bet it was this top end here, we had a stem growing up. So we had a plant growing there. And so, great, we got this. But then you can see this yellow mark here. That's a fresh wound. This broke off. That's fresh. And so this and this probably left a little bit in the ground. Good, bad. Most of the resources, most of the nutrients came out of the ground. There's a little bit left behind. It may be in this pile or not. Hard to tell. But this is flood debris, absolutely. And you can tell simply because it's a big clump of...
Is that a chunk of rhizome like that? Did they get that big and chunky?
Yeah. You want it? You can have it. Check it. So there may be something still in the ground here we don't know. And this is why when we find these things, we want to be so careful, just because a little bit of care goes a long way to making sure that you got rid of the whole thing. Although I'll give you credit, it's a nice effort. You pulled a lot out. Because this was all up above that chunk you pulled, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like no matter what, this is a multi-year project.
Well, yeah, and you just...
Well, and that's...
Every time you find it, you'll eventually get it.
Well, and again, that's why this year is such a big deal, because if you can find the flood debris, 1 year, one dig, you know, unless you come back and you look for that little piece that broke off, you can confidently say you remove the entire plant, problem solved. Here, there won't be that next year or the year after.
It might come up like this again, right?
But there might be one.
Right.
You just dig this up again and...
Exactly, and because...
Digging it in 5 years, you'll probably get it all.
Well, and because he got so much here, there's not that much there to work with. So as soon as a new shoot pops up, there's a very good chance that it's just that little remainder. So he could, you know, if you came back, say, in August, if you dug all this up now, came back in August and said, oh, 1, 2, 3, that's all I missed. Boom, boom, boom. You dig those out, clean.
I found a whole bunch of other ones over there.
So, yeah, you know, so what I want at this point, essentially, this is my greedy part of the thing. I've scared you, I've inspired you, I've educated you. You know, I want you to be able to see the smaller ones, recognize them, be able to spot them from a distance, be willing to get online, put these on a map, let me know that it's there, and then, you know, talk to the people who are official and semi-official today and say, hey, put me on the mailing list, because when I put out announcements, these guys will inevitably get that mailing list. Or sorry, I will inevitably ask them to put out to their mailing lists, because they are the local contacts, they are the local organizations, they're the people that are going to be able to get in touch with people like yourselves.
Curious with the landscapers and not at all. But so you typically be working with, say, a contractor who's going to bring in soil and fill, and it seems that would be a place to do some education and outreach too. So landscapers who maybe are using a bobcat or something and pulling it out at least aren't saying, "Not to hell with it. There's some roots in there, but I don't care." The more we, yeah.
But I think it could start with the schools, with the kids. Like maybe teachers could do programs where the kids, when they go on a hike, and they go try to find this stuff as well. So they can start from young. This thing, they say it takes 14 years to get the word out. So, you know, I'd be curious if you've heard of other school systems that have gotten kids involved.
I've worked with a couple of school systems already this season, which was impressive considering I only started in April. I was very proud of myself. And I've got a summer course at CCV working with me this summer. And what I'm going to try to do is try and get in touch with maybe some of the summer camps and see if any of them have any outdoor time that they want to be a little educational as well. So.
Absolutely. If I get 30 yards from somebody, I hope that excavator knew what...
Like a mailing campaign even out to these guys who are scooping up gravel that might have these very same
Because that's
shoots.
what could have happened here too, right? This could have been filled from somewhere else and the guy just dumped it.
Right.
Thought nothing of it.
Right.
They also have what's called grubbings that are just the scoop this kind of stuff up, and they're
FEMA is paying for that to be able to get growth, the matter, alongside of roads and in these places.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So I wonder how we can kind of ensure.
That would be finding out if they have standards in choosing sites to source the material from, or if they just, you know, are like, oh, look, side of the road, great, scoop and throw something else over there, or if they have pits, or if they have contractors working for them who are bringing them in fill from their own pits or yards or whatever.
My understanding is it's more just the plant matter, roots and
Yes.
everything else.
Yeah, the plants are the, but I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know what the standards are, and
Because I know from V-Trans they were talking, you know, because we have a lot of places in Newfane that the Cordova Road was wiped out, and we've got to get some growth going. So
right. And what you want to do there first, before you can get something to grow, you've got to make sure that things like this aren't there, because all they're going to do is inhibit your growth project next season, the season after, and you'll end up with a fail. And all you have to do, you know, just like we were talking about 20 minutes ago, if these guys had come through here and done a quick sweep, pulled out their things that were in the way, this wouldn't be here now. It wouldn't have become a problem. It's an issue of, you know, oversight, or maybe that's too strong a word. It's an issue of like not knowing that it's gonna be a problem. Yeah. So. Yeah. So we good?
Yeah. Thank
Excellent.
you very much.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Have
And
you ever heard of, I know
Yeah.
we're in a little actual cove that there's rain all around the cove. Have you ever heard of putting vinegar?
I have heard of using vinegar. Yeah, acetic acid and citric acid as well. But what you end up with is a relatively low kill rate. You'll get like 25% kill, 30% kill, but it's doable. You can use it. It's more of a cut stump treatment. It's more of an injection type treatment. They do sell stronger versions of both of those, but that's not over-the-counter stuff at that point. That actually starts to turn into like organic herbicides. So yeah, it's totally viable.
You have a big stand like over there, you cut it, pour vinegar, or spray.
Yeah, and probably more cut and treat, and then you'd probably end up killing about a quarter of it, ish. It's the start, right? And then the next year you do it again, and you get a quarter, and then yeah.
Yeah, we were treating it up to our church, and Bill Gunter had given us a recommendation of what non-invasive chemical to use. And someone was cutting it, and then someone would go along and put that dab onto the...
Exactly.
It's a slow process, but it did.
It's
they
slow
went back
and it's
looked at
effective.
It did work on what we treated.
It is good, but you know, then you've got the top that you just got rid of. You've got to put it somewhere, and that's the problem with that particular thing.
Right.
And the part where you had 2, maybe 3 guys. You know, someone was cutting, somebody was sticking the blade, somebody was dabbing it. It's that labor-intensive thing. So, you know, if there's the market for it, if there's the interest in it, it's a great thing to do. But lots of people either don't have the time or the money or the manpower to do it that way.
Would that have killed that root too?
Because the plant takes the chemical into the roots, and that way you get to the roots and kill it. Yeah, that's why timing is so important, because if you mistime it, you just put a bunch of killing chemical on the plant, and you kill the stem, not the root. You've got to time it just so to make sure that the chemical gets drawn into the plant, spread throughout, you know, the xylem and the phloem and the cambium layers, get into the root, and then kill the roots to a great enough extent that it's too weak to put up another shoot. Or if it is going to put something up, it's small and relatively weak, and then you can knock that one back very easily the next time around.
So it was proper timing.
Yeah, I think he mentioned fall was the best time.
Because plants in the spring are pushing out, you know, they're growing out, and all of the resources are going this way. So it's very hard to get the resources to go back in the other direction. Come autumn and late summer, plants start to draw back and start to prepare for winter. And so that constant drawing in of materials is a good thing to take advantage of for this type of work. Yeah.
So you cut the tops off of plastic bags that
The plastic tarping type control method is generally ineffective and generally a waste of time.
Just put them in a big plastic bag.
Oh, yeah, sure. And then if you put them in a bag, and then just put that like in the garage or on the parking lot or in a can or whatever, yeah, you let it sit for about 3 weeks and it'll turn to mush. It's just like drying it out, only you're doing that consolidated cook, rot, mushy, quick, artificial composting.
Because you're saying making a big pile is not a good idea on top of the ground. It's crowded.
Oh, I think it would just go.
Yeah, if you're gonna make a big pile of it somewhere, you should have it on something raised. So like a wire rack, pallets, something to make sure that there's airflow under to dry out the pile, to make sure that any roots that do start to grow dry out and hopefully get desiccated by all that air current. If it's right on the ground or even right on pavement, there's enough of a suitable environment to allow the roots to grow. And I know roots can grow through pavement from the bottom up. I don't know if they can grow in the other direction, and I don't want to find out. So.
Brian, I was just trying to think of some way that we didn't pass the sheet around when everybody was here, so we don't have contact information. About a couple of weeks ago, how long ago? A month ago, the Wyndham Regional Commission had an event, and we invited conservation commissions, and there was a substantial email list that was generated that way. So I was just thinking, as a suggestion, so we could, if there are people that didn't attend or want to be on a general email list, my recommendation would be to call Wyndham Regional Commission.
Probably Dinah Reed.
Dinah Reed.
D-I-N-A-H.
Yeah, she's the Natural Resource Committee staff person. And one of the things we wanted to do with that listserv is exactly this. If there's some activities that are going on in some part of the county that people want to be involved in, or there's some opportunities volunteer opportunities to go out with work courses. So I just think that might be one way to draw folks together in a group.
Dinah Reed, everybody. Y'all taking notes?
No,
No.
Is there a site where all of us could go on and just kind of sign up to, maybe it's just for the Wyndham Regional?
Yeah, I'd go that route.
Yeah.
Because I'm not making any lists of my own, again, partly to just manage my workload, but also to try to encourage that local signing up, because me generating a list isn't going to do anybody any good, because I'm theoretically statewide, and these activities have to be locally generated, locally organized, and locally, managed, ideally. I can come and help, like I said, but I'd rather not.
This would be much better let us take off.
Cool.
Great.
All right. No problem.
Very much.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for staying. Cool. And then I have a black plastic bag that we can... Cool. And then I should give this back.
Knotweed guy in England.
No.
Like the infomercial of Japanese knotweed over in England.
Really?
You should check out his site. I saw him talk.
An infomercial.
Oh, check it out. It's the Japanese knotweed guy, and that's what he's called. You get on his site, and it's cheesy as hell, but he's killing it over in England, getting rid of this stuff. And the way he was one of those guys telling me that he's trucking this stuff out, putting it 30 feet in the ground and covering it. And the newest thing that he's come out with is this mesh. In the spring, and the thought process is that it's going up through the mesh, and as it's getting older, girdling itself. Huh. Check it out. It's the Japanese. Literally, he's calling himself the Japanese knotweed guy.
That's really interesting. So he's assuming that you've got it and it's going to grow.
His duty is because in England, these people can't sell their property, so they have to get rid of the knotweed in order to sell their property.
That's really interesting.
Anyway,
It might be a scam, but you're right. It's really neat.
Talk this winter at the Eco Attraction Association.